Says the Gemara Mishnah, we're talking about now Daf Yomi, Masechet Avodah Zarah Daf Kaf Aleph Amud Aleph, 21a1. We're going to start on 20b, the Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, En maskirin lahem batim beretz Yisrael. You're not allowed to rent out batim to the Oved Kochavim in Eretz Yisrael. Yeah, he says, Ve'en tzarich lomar sadot. So you're not allowed to rent out houses. And obviously you're not allowed to come and you're not allowed to rent out sadot. Right? Because in sadot, you're going to have two, right? Isurim. Also lotechonem, and also an extra, right? Isur, which is going to be brought down to the Gemara. Okay? Uvesuria. Right? Now in Syria, right? Maskirin lahem batim. You're allowed to rent out houses. Avalo sadot, but not fields. Uvechutz haaretz, and in the chutz haaretz, mochlim batim. You could sell them houses. Maskirin lahem sadot. You could rent out fields. So basically, it comes out that according to Rabbi Meir, in Chutz Haaretz everything's mutar. Rabbi Yosef, he's going to argue. Rabbi Yosef Omer, Beretz Yisrael, maskirim lahem batim avelo sadot. You're allowed to rent out houses, but you're not allowed to rent out the fields. Uvesuria, you're allowed to sell the batim, and you're allowed to rent out the fields. Right? Uvechutz Haaretz, you're allowed to do everything. Right? Ben batim ben sadot. Why? Because since you're so far away from Eretz Yisrael, there's no gezerah that you're going to come and sell in Eretz Yisrael. Meaning, lo biglal shata macharta b'chutz haaretz ata timkor b'Eretz Yisrael. Ve'af b'makom she'amru laskir, lo levet dira amru. Also in a place, right, where they come and they say, right, that it's mutar laskir, right? He comes and he says, lo levet dira amru. We didn't talk about a bet dira. Because obviously then they're going to bring in, right, oved kochavim. Shneimar b'zeh pasuk, lo tavi to'eva al betecha. You're not allowed to rent out a house that they're going to bring inside of it toevot. Yeah, you're listening? No toevot. Yeah, uvechol makom, and in every place, lo yaskilu et hamerchatz. You're not allowed to rent out the bathhouse. Mivineshu nikral shemo, because it's called on the name of the maskir, not on the name. So therefore, when he's going to heat it up on Shabbat, it looks like it's yours. Meaning the bathhouse, the bet hamerchatz, ze al shimcha. So me'afilu meta iskarta et ze lenochri. It's kilu that it's still yours. So nobody knows that you rent it out to the Nochri. So everyone thinks, you have your bathhouse, right? Patuach b'Shabbat v'zasur. Okay, says the Gemara. Right? We just said in the Gemara is going to analyze the Mishnah. Remember, the Mishnah is a Mishnah, and then the Gemara takes the Mishnah and is going to decipher the Mishnah. The Mishnah said that according to Shittat Rabbi Meir, in Eretz Yisrael, it's asur laskil odvechovim batim, ve'en tzrich lomar sadot. Right? Which means asru askara batim ve'kol sheken sadot. Bait kol sheken sadeh. So says the Gemara, what does it mean? En tzrich lomar sadot. Ileima mishum ditarte. Maybe you're going to say there's two different isurim. Chada chaniat karka. You remember we said lo techonem. The first explanation lo techonem was chaniat karka. Vechada tekamaf kelam maaser. Two different isurim. Number one, you're not allowed to give them chania bekarka. Number two, you're taking away trumot u'masrot when you give them the sadeh. So Yehachi, if so, but Nami Katarte, you also have two in the bite. Chada chaniat karka, vechada the kamaf kelem mezuzah. You took away a mezuzah. So says the Gemara, Amarav Misharshe answers, mezuzah chovat adarhu. Mezuzah is a chova on the one that's living in it. So you're not taking away the chova of the mezuzah. Meaning, the mezuzah is not on the owner. The mezuzah is the one that's living in the house. So if you have a non-Jew which is living in the Jewish house, hu lo chayav mezuzah. Lama hu lo chayav mezuzah? Ken? Hu lo chayav mezuzah bigלל זה לא יהודי. כן? הוא לא חייב mezuzah. אז אין בעיה. Okay? So therefore you're not being mafkia the mezuzah. It's only the field that you're being mafkia the trumot u'masrot. Next. Besuria. In Surya we said maskirim lehem batim. You're allowed to rent out the houses, but not sadot. And Rabbi Meir, he's prohibiting houses to the kochavim. Okay? So he comes and he says like this. Why is it that you're not allowed to come and sell the houses? That Rabbi Meir does not permit it. Which means that why is it that Rabbi Meir says you're not allowed to sell the house? Mishum mechira deretz Yisrael. So he says the reason why is because if you sell it in Syria, right, you're allowed to sell in Eretz Yisrael. So says so you're not allowed to rent it out. Because if you're going to rent it out in Syria, you're going to rent it out in Eretz Yisrael. So says no. He gufa gezerah ve'ana nekum gezerah. He says I don't understand you. Renting out in Eretz Yisrael to Avodah Kochavim is already a gzerat chachamim. It's not Yisur Torah because Isur Torah is only mechira, not the schirut. As they said, if you're going to be so maskid, you're going to be mocher. So that's already a gezerah. And we're going to come and do a gezerah l'gezerah that we don't do. We don't do a gezerah l'gezerah. So says the Gemara, that's schirut sadeh de Surya. What about schirut of the sadeh? Which is also gezerah l'gezerah. Why? Because you're renting out a field in Syria because of renting out a field in Eretz Yisrael. That is a gezerah l'gezerah. Because Rabbi Meir says that in Syria you're not allowed to be renting out the sadot. So therefore he is making gezerah shava. Haskarat sadot b'Syria, right? Because of haskarat batim. And haskarat batim in Syria because of haskarat batim in Eretz Yisrael. So says the Gemara, hatam lav gezerahu. It's not a gezerah. Kasavar kibush yachid shme kibush. Rabbi Meir holds that when you add kibush yachid, it's considered a kibush, which means that it helps for kedushat Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, according to him, it's an isur Torah to give to Oved Kochavim Chaniya B'Karka B'Surya, because that was conquered, right, in kibush yachid. And since it was conquered by kibush yachid, so it's not a gezerah l'gezerah, it's one gezerah. When the yachid comes and he conquers it, it belongs to all of Bnei Yisrael. It's not only just kibush of Rabim.
הייתה לי השאלה הזאת לגבי סוריה, ואז הגמרא התחילה לענות לגבי סוריה, כי זה קרבת מקום. החינם יוקם, קרבת מקום, לבנון לא, ירדן לא, עבר הירדן לא, למה זה קרבת מקום? אז רבה, יפה מאוד, אז למה סוריה? אז תענה אם כאן. כתוב כאן. נו.
סוריה זה היה מתי שהם באו והם כיבשו את זה, האם זה היה בן אדם יחיד, או האם זה היה כולם ביחד? כשזה היה כולם ביחד, אז זה לא נקרא כיבוש יחיד. אז בסוריה זה היה משהו מיוחד, שכשהם באו והם כבשו, הם כבשו חלקים מסוריה, ואז ממילא, ברגע שיש את כיבוש, האם זה נחשב שזה חלק מארץ ישראל או לא? אז זה דווקא בסוריה ולא בכל מקום אחר.
אבל אתה לא יכול לעשות שאלה, האם לא אפשר לעשות זה גם...
שדה התבטרתה. So sadeh, you have two different halachot. So since you have two different isurim by sadeh, because you had, remember, chaniya, and you also had afkat maaser. So gazur berabanan, so the rabbis made a gezerah. Batim, you don't have two avirot. Batim is only chaniya. So los gazur banan, they did not make, right, a gezerah. Okay, fine. Next. Okay, chutzaretz. So says the Gemara, in chutzaretz, we said that you're allowed to sell batim and askarat sadot. In chutzaretz, it's going to be oser, Rabbi Meir, only mechirat sadot. So he says like this: Sadedit betarte. Saded, you have two different ones. Gazu berabanan. The rabbis were going to make a gezerah. Batim dele beutarte, but batim that you do not have tarte, lo gazu berabanan. So again, remember the sadeh you always have two. The batim you always have one. Rabbi Yosef Omer, Rabbi Yosef says, be'eretz Yisrael maskirim laim batim. My tama. Why is it that in Eretz Yisrael you're allowed to be maskir batim? How does that make sense? So he says, Sadoti butarte gazobanan, batim dele betarte lo gazobanan. According to him, there's no two halachot, it's only one halacha, chaniya. So you're allowed to be maskirotam, because kishata maskirotam, you're accepting money. So therefore, they didn't make such a decree. Uvesurya mochri. My tama, what's reasoning? Kibush yachid lav shme kibush. He says, that holds that kibush yachid does not help to be considered, right, kibush. And therefore, Surya does not have kiddushat Eretz Yisrael, and therefore there's no yisur of chaniya. The sadedit betarte, now saded that you have both of them, gazru berobanan. Atim dele beutarte, lo gazru berabanan. Next, chutzaretz mochrin. Chutzaretz, you're allowed to sell it. My time, what's reasoning? And since it's so far away, they didn't make a gezerah. Meaning, if chutzaretz, it's meaning since the land is so far away from Eretz Yisrael, I'm not going to make a decree. 1 second, you sold a field in France, so now you're going to sell a field in Eretz Yisrael. We don't do that, right? Why? Lo gazinan. You tell me that achok. Amar Rav Yudam Shmuel says Rav Shmuel, the halacha like Rabbi Yosef, that in Eretz Yisrael you're allowed to be askarat batim lovdei kochavim, but you're not allowed to sell batim, and obviously not allowed to sell sadot. And in Surya you're allowed to sell batim and askarat sadot, and in chutzaretz you're allowed to do everything. Okay. Yes, but this is how we are paskening. This is the Rav Yudam Shmuel halachak Rabbi Yosef. So Amar Rav Yosef says Rav Yosef, uvilvad shelo yasena shchuna. You're not allowed to make it like a shchuna of Ovdei Kochavim, right? That means even when you're going to do it, you're not allowed to make it that it should become a shchuna to them. Okay, v'kama shchuna. So what do you mean now a shchuna? Well, you're going to sell 5 houses, 10 houses. What's a shchuna? So he says, Tana en shchuna pachota mishlosha bnei adam, in 3 different houses. which means the Gabala of Rav Yosef is that you're not allowed to sell 3 houses Ratzuf to 3 different Ovdei Kochavim, but you're allowed to sell 2 to 2 different Ovdei Kochavim. Okay? ולכו שדיל מאזיל היי ישראל ומזבל לאחד עובד כוכבים ואז אל הייך ומזבל לתרי. Just 1 second, but I've got a question. You got 1 Jew, he's going to sell to 1 goy, and then you're going to have another Jew that he's going to come and sell to another 2 goyim, and then you have 3 in a row. Meaning, how do you not make a shchuna? I'm going to have 1 house, you have another house, he has another house. If you start selling houses, each Jew might sell to another goy, so then in the end it's going to become a shchuna. So how does that work then? Right, 1 minute. He says, I'm an Abaye comes and he says, right, alifne mafkedinan, falifne delifne lo mafkedinan. You remember we already learned this at the beginning of the Gemara, that we said that a person is only over on lifne velotlim shol, but he's not over on 2 lifne velifne. Right? So therefore, this is already too far away. So therefore, I'm not going to suspect a lifne v'dilifne. Meaning, this is too much that I'm going to suspect that he's going to come. It's like a derech hakifa kazoti. So ever since it's going to be derech hakifa, we're not going to suspect for it. So Kakadosh, it says on the 2 dots on the bottom, we're talking about af b'mekom shamru laskir. So the Mishnah is teaching us that in the places where they permitted you to be maskir batim of the kochavim, right, there was only 4. Right? לא הטילו להם לצורך דיורים, אלא צרכים אחרים, לא ממש לגור שם. Because if he's going to bring an Avodah Zarah inside, it's going to be a problem. So Miklal dika duchta delo mugre. He says, what? It's much more that you could sell it, you're going to rent it out, and it's not for living, so then it's going to be permitted. What does that mean? So says the Gemara, ustama Rabbi Meir. So it comes out of the stama, then is going to be like Rabbi Meir, that in Eretz Yisrael it's asur laskir batim of the kochavim. Because if you're going to tell me it's going to be in the shita of Rabbi Yosef, you're allowed to rent out places even in Eretz Yisrael. Meaning you could rent out a house in Eretz Yisrael to a goy. Kafala femubet. Yeah, 22b. Okay, 21b. Sorry. Kafala femubet. Fine. Uvchol makom lo yiskor. Now we just said you're not allowed to come and rent out to Avodah Kochavim a bet merchatz. Why? Because a bet merchatz is always called on your name. So when you rent it out to the goy, if he's going to have it on Shabbat open, it's going to be a problem because that means kilu you have it open. So Tanya, we learned in a right out says, don't rent out your Masechet to Oved Kochavim, because it's written, it's called on your name. So now he's going to be doing melachot on Shabbat and Yom Tov. He's warming up the water and everything, and it's a problem of Manitain. Right? By the way, this is halacha l'maaseh until today, this concept of the bet merchatz, because if it's called on your name, so then it's going to be a problem. Right? Obviously nowadays, if it's not called on your name, it's not a problem, but meaning that the concept, right? This Gemara, as brought down in Shulchan Aruch. Aval lekuti, my, but to a kuti, are you allowed to rent it out or not? So you would for sure should be shadi, right? Kuti, he says 1 second, but maybe he's going to do melacha on Chol Moed. Meaning for sure he's not going to do it on Shabbat, but on Chol Moed he might do. So he said, we also do it on Chol Moed if we needed to, which means that heating up water is tzorech lechitza that you're allowed to do. On Chol Moed you're allowed to heat up water. It's a melacha which is permitted. So therefore, there's no isur. The kuti is not going to be mechalel Shabbat. So I don't have the problem of that. So that's why kuti would be permitted, right? Not like the nochri. But at the end of the day, what's he going to do? He's going to do melachan chol moed. You're allowed to also. Aval sadeu leovei kochavim mai. But are you allowed to rent out your field to an ovei kochavim? So you would say it's mutar. My time, what's reasoning? Because he's just doing arisut, which means if somebody is going to come and see an ovei kochavim doing melacha on Shabbat, you're just going to say he's not a poel sachir, he's arisut. Remember, there's a difference between arisut and a poel sachir. Poel sachir means that he's working for you. He's not allowed to work for you on Shabbat, because then if he's working for you on Shabbat, it's a problem. But if right now he's going to come and he's going to do arisut is permitted because he's a sharecropper, so he's doing it for himself. So for obviously it's going to be a different halacha, right? So he comes and he says merchatz nami amni. Also merchatz is the same thing. Amni, we're going to say arisut kavi. Right, the people that are going to come, they're going to see he's also doing arisut, which means that it should be permitted, right? Because at the end of the day, he's doing it on his own accord. Arisut means that when he's doing it for himself. He gets a chelek of the produce, and therefore, when he's doing it for himself, there's no problem. So the same thing over here, he's not doing it for you; he's doing it for himself. So answers the Gemara, he said the merchatz avidinish. Nobody does an arisut for the merchatz, and therefore, obviously, if he's doing it for you, and that's why it's going to be a sur. The Tanya we learned in a Braita. Right? Rabbi Shimon ben Lazar, right? he comes and he says, Lo yaskir adam sadeo lekuti. A person should not come and rent out his field to a kuti. Why? So even when you're going to rent out a field to a kuti, also it's going to be the same halacha, because why? It's called on his name. And again, the kuti is doing melacha on chol moed. Now on the field, on the bet hamilchatz, we said there's no problem, but you're also allowed to do it on chol moed. Meaning you're allowed to come and you're allowed to heat up water on chol moed in order to bathe yourself. So therefore, the kuti is doing the same thing, mutar. But here we're talking about doing melacha on the field on chol moed that you're not allowed to do. So he says, aval oved kochavim mai. But what about the oved kochavim? It should be mutar because that is serus dechai. So Yachiv sold kuti also. You're going to say serus dechai. He's doing it for the arisut. So answers the Gemara, right? Kavbet amud aleph on the top. Arisute. The Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar letle. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar does not hold this concept of right arisut, that he's doing it for arisut, right? And therefore he says that it's a sur for Israel to rent out the property to the kuti. Ella. Yeah, Oved Kochavim Maitama Mutar. So therefore, why is it going to be Mutar? Ta'amnina Levet Sa'id. Right? Because why? We're going to come, we're going to say, he's listening. What does it mean he's listening? We're going to come and say that the Oved Kochavim, right, that's renting it out, is not going to do a Sadeh Melacha on Shabbat. Right?